Hello. So we are today running a QuickBooks webinar, which is in place of the normal quarterly bookkeeping webinar that we do for free. So we run this one for free too. This is going to be run by Jacob from QuickBooks, who I'll hand over to in a second. Whilst he's running through this, if you have a look, there is a chat box, and if you have any questions, if you type them in there, I'll answer them as Jacob is taking you through the stuff. So if I hand over to Jacob, he can get going.
Brilliant. Afternoon, everyone. Thanks very much, Ben. So yeah, absolutely, as Ben mentioned, we're today going to be looking at increasing efficiency in your business with QuickBooks. I work in the service delivery team at QuickBooks, working very closely with McGills, and they've obviously asked me to work with them on this webinar. So just to quickly point out the agenda that we'll be going through today, we will be looking a little bit at the QuickBooks mobile app, and I'll be pointing out why I think that's quite relevant to go through. I'll be going through with you how to connect a bank feed and what the benefits of that are within QuickBooks. And then finally, we're going to show you some of the new functionality we have around the QuickBooks receipt capture, which has really been a game changer for most of the small businesses that I work with who are looking to claim back their expenses. As Ben mentioned, on the right-hand side of the screen, you've got the chat box. Any technical issues or any questions at all, please feel free to put them in the chat box there. Similarly, if you scroll down just below where I'm speaking now, there are three tabs. There's the questions, polls, and offers tabs. Now, the offers one isn't relevant to us today, but questions, that's another place to put the questions in. Honestly, you put them there or you put them in the chat box, not an issue at all, as long as you do feel free to ask any questions you have. And there is a little poll section with just a couple of polls that I put in there. At the end of the webinar, we'll ask you, did you find the webinar useful, and would you attempt more webinars in the future? So without further ado, what I will be doing is extending my screen and showing you the QuickBooks mobile app just to start with. So there we go. So you won't be able to see mine or Ben's faces anymore, but you should still be able to hear us. And don't worry, by the way, this webinar is being recorded, so feel free to just follow along and you will get a copy of the recording after. Now, today's webinar is all about increasing efficiency, and I think that efficiency piece is really, really crucial here. We want to help businesses become more efficient, and the app is a great place to start with that. Now, QuickBooks Online is an online product that most people access from their laptops or computers, but there's also a mobile app that comes with it free of charge. Now, it is user-friendly, it's quick to use as well, and the real focus, I think, around that efficiency piece is so important is that we know that small businesses are spending approximately a third of their time every year on admin. Now, that is around 120 days approximately, and a lot of that is done after the working day. So things like, creating invoices, estimates, claiming back expenses, etc. And if there's a way to make that a little bit better for you, then I'd like to promote QuickBooks to you today. So there's opportunities to save time on things like your bank feeds and snapping pictures of receipts and bills and sending them through to QuickBooks using the app. Now, for those of you who do have QuickBooks, or those of you who are thinking about getting QuickBooks as well, the app has a rating of 4.7 out of 5 on the app stores. Now, there are three flavors, as we like to call it, of the mobile app. There is the Android version. So if you have a Samsung or something similar, there's the iPhone model, which I've got here, and there's the iPad model as well. They all have exactly the same functionality, but do have slight visual differences. And you are able to download it from either the Google Play or the Apple App Store. You type in QuickBooks Accounting, and it's going to be completely free for anybody that has a QuickBooks license. So if you do get QuickBooks or you do currently have it, if you log into QuickBooks Online with your login details, it will be exactly the same standard login information, the email address and password you use for the mobile app as well. And the mobile app works in tandem with QuickBooks Online. It's not there to replace it. It's purely there to enhance the experience that you have in being able to run your business. So let me take you through a quick run through of the mobile app. Now, the QuickBooks mobile app is split into two sections. You've got the dashboard at the top, and you've got activity as well. Now, the dashboard is basically a place where I'm going to see a quick snapshot of all the information relating to my business that I have in QuickBooks. And as somebody who runs a small business myself, this is quite useful. First and foremost, I've got my profit and loss. So really what it is my income versus my expenses, where I am at. Now, you can see in the top right of that little profit and loss box is a little phrase said this year. If I click into that, I can actually change the time periods. I can even look at the last 30 days, for example, and see how my income is versus my expenses. Now, the app is extremely interactive, and I can click into any of these boxes by clicking, for example, view profit and loss, and I can get a different graph in there, change the time period, I can view a report, and it just means I'm going to be able to have a much better conversation with my accountant, with McGills, at the end of the financial year, when I want to understand how I can increase my income and reduce my expenses, perhaps. Below that, I've got my invoices. Now, invoices, there is an option within the QuickBooks mobile app, as there is, of course, within QuickBooks Online, to send invoices directly to customers. So imagine being able to do that through the product and then being able to check, I suppose, through the app whether an invoice has been paid or unpaid. And QuickBooks has a fantastic system of telling you, using a timeline, if an invoice has been sent, if it's been viewed, if it has been paid, and of course, if it's been deposited into your bank account. So, for example, I've got an invoice here from Ivy, or rather, I've got an invoice I sent to Ivy. We can see here it's over 90 days overdue, which is outrageous, really. It's been sent, it's got a nice tick there, but I can see that Ivy hasn't viewed that invoice. Similarly, I could look down here, for example, and I can see I've got ones that I've due soon. I've also got, if I wanted to look through, for example, invoices that already have been sent, viewed, and paid. The only thing it hasn't been is deposited, and that's because it's a cash payment. Now, obviously, I'm just flicking through that, but the idea is to show you the benefits of being able to track those invoices on the go. Underneath that, I've got my expenses. Now, I haven't really spent much on my business in the last 30 days. It is winding down a little bit at the moment. But again, very similar to my profit and loss. In the top right-hand corner of that expenses box, I can change the time period. I can look at, for example, this year. And then I've got a real run through, if I click into it, of all of the expenses I've spent. And this will allow me to have that conversation with my accountant at the end of the financial year to understand exactly where I am spending my money. And finally, at the bottom, I've got my account balances. Now, I'm going to go through this in a little bit about bank feeds and the real benefit of QuickBooks and automation by having your bank feeds connected in QuickBooks. Now, that's sort of the dashboard side of things. The activity is showing up all the recent activity we've done, either in QuickBooks Online or in the mobile app, relating to what I would call my QuickBooks license, the license that has all my business information in. I can see invoices that I've sent, I've got little notes in there, and I can have a real good look through of things I've done recently. So if I forget if I've done something, I can go through and just have a quick look. Now, at the bottom, I've got three buttons. Naturally, the bottom left button is a home button. It's going to take me back to this page. But right at the bottom, I've got a plus button. And the plus button is going to give me quick access to features I'll be using on a regular basis. So remember I mentioned at the beginning, the app's benefit of really helping you improve efficiency. Imagine if you've got all your customers saved in QuickBooks, all of your products and services, the things that you're selling saved in QuickBooks. You could create an estimate or an invoice on the go. And the concept here is even in a sort of, you could, for example, send that invoice in your car, on the driveway, when you're just seeing a customer, that sort of thing. You can, things like you can track your expenses a lot better, add mileage trips, snap pictures of receipts. There's a whole host of things. I'm not going to sort of, go through them all today, but it's just to show you all of the benefits you can do. And these are just things you can do in the app. There are even more things you can do in QuickBooks Online as well. And finally, in the bottom right-hand corner, I've got what we call the burger button. Now, I'm not a particularly creative person. I see that as 3 lines. But if you give that a click, again, very similar to the plus button, we've got access to features we're going to be using on a regular basis, but with a bit more of a visual on there. So, for example, I got access to my customers, my invoicing. Again, we've got that receipt snap in the bottom left-hand corner. In the top right, you've got access to a free 90-day cash flow planner, a forecasting tool that will allow you to plan your cash flow across the next 90 days, particularly useful at the moment with the pandemic that we've got. And these are just the shortcuts. If you want to see a full list of all the features you can be using in the QuickBooks mobile app, you can go to the top next to shortcuts. It says all, and it's just going to give you a full list of all the options you've got in there. Maybe I want to see a more detailed report of my profit and loss, for example. Okay, now that is a really quick run through of the QuickBooks mobile app. I suppose the idea here is to really show you how you can use QuickBooks, or rather the mobile app potentially, for your business. And the idea here is to be able to control your business, not just on the computer, but on the go as well. Save you time, reduce the time you're spending on admin. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you from the QuickBooks mobile app into QuickBooks Online. So for those of you who aren't familiar, of course, this is the QuickBooks Online product here. It's going to make it slightly bigger for you. And much like the QuickBooks mobile app, we have got access to a snapshot of our business based upon information we've already got in QuickBooks. And you can see it's quite healthy in terms of what I've got in there. And it's just going to mean that I have a better understanding of my business and I'm staying on top of my business, understanding it a little bit better. We've even got access to the cash flow planner on there as well. Now, what I'm going to go through today is the bank feed. Now, this is a classic point that a lot of people raise. In September of last year, there was a piece of legislation that came to play called open banking. Now, this isn't just specifically to QuickBooks. It would be brilliant if we had our own legislation, but actually this is relating to any company you work with, a third-party company that has access to your financial information. Now, this is something I really, really want to I suppose, tell you about, is that the legislation allows financial information to be shared electronically, securely, and that's really important for me as a consumer, and efficiently. Okay, so what it means now is that open banking legislation means that the banks are in control of the bank feeds. Okay, so there is now a standardized process across all the banks, giving you a much better user experience. And by connecting your QuickBooks Online to your bank feed, you're going to get an up-to-date bank feed with real-time information that comes through the bank. It's going to give you a real-time view of how your business is performing. And again, it's going to be able to drive things like the profit and loss on here, my expenses, etc. Now, as part of this legislation, as I said, the security is really important. It is controlled by the banks. When you connect your bank feed to QuickBooks, you are connecting directly to that bank. You, of course, cannot receive or send money directly through QuickBooks. It's purely mirroring what is in your bank feed. And as part of the legislation, you only have to update your bank feed every 90 days, every 3 months, which takes less than a minute, and it's purely from a security point of view on there. There are huge time savings here. You don't have to print off PDFs or CSV files given to your accountant. You're going to be able to get a really good insight into your business, what's going money in and money out. So if I wanted to connect my bank feed, on the left-hand side, I've got transactions. If you're using QuickBooks currently and it's currently undergone an update, you may see it as banking instead of transactions, but it's going to take you to the same screen. Now, I've already got my HSBC current account set up on here, but I'm going to show you how we can connect a new bank account, and I'll take you through the process of it as well. So in the top right-hand corner here, I have got the option to link account. I'm going to give that a click. Now, there are many banks that you can connect to. In fact, we've pretty much got 98% of the major banks, challenger banks, etc. at the moment. As part of the legislation, as I mentioned, the bank feeds are controlled by the banks. Now, if the bank has released something called an API, it means you are able to connect to their feed. So in this particular case, I'm going to choose Monzo. That's a challenger bank that I use. And by the way, if I have multiple business accounts, I can connect, of course, multiple bank accounts to QuickBooks. So I'm going to choose Monzo here. And it's going to take me through to a screen to sign in. And this has come up with that piece of legislation that I mentioned, the consent to connect for 90 days. And what it really means is that it allows Intuit to generate financial reports and other consolidated information until the 31st of January 2021, which means good news is about 55 or so days to Christmas. And I recommend you have a really good read of this, have a look through the Intuit data sharing policy as well. And what it's going to do is, if I click agree, it's going to open up a little screen. Now, actually, I'm just going to reshare my screen there to show you what I've got. Okay, so we can see here a little window pops up. And this is as part of the open banking legislation I wanted to point out here. We can see here it says verify.monzo.com in the URL. You're no longer in QuickBooks, you're connecting directly to your bank. And although there is a standardized process across all the banks in terms of the way you connect, each bank account will ask you for different information. So in this case, Monzo has asked me for an account number, a sort code, and my email address. And then what I have to do is I have to approve it on my mobile app. Now, HSBC asked me for a username, a passcode, and it's very, very different in terms of what information it will ask me for, but it's no information that you wouldn't normally use to connect your online banking. So I click continue. I go to my phone. I make sure that I have okayed it. And once I've done that, it's going to approve it. And it's now going to go through the process of connecting. Now, it should take less than a minute to do this. Okay, notice that QuickBooks is now talking to Monzo directly and it is looking to connect. Now, if I had a bank account that had multiple accounts, so let's say Barclays, for example, I have a current account, a savings account, a credit account, it's going to come up with all the options I have. In this particular case, Monzo is just a current account, so it's come up with the one account on here. I click into it and I choose what type of account it is. Now, I've already set up a Monzo current account on there, and then it comes up with the option to pull in the information. Now, with open banking, you can, in some cases, connect up to 1 year's or 2 years worth of transactional information. In this case, with Monzo, I can connect up to 1 year's worth of transactional information. Now, just because you can do that doesn't mean you should, and this is a conversation to have with McGills. If you do, you should only be bringing in information from the beginning of your financial year. So you can see here, I have the option to choose this year, the full year. I have today's date, this month, or I could actually choose a custom date. Now, my financial year as a business starts on the 1st of April. So I'm going to bring in the 1st of April onwards. So it's going to bring through all of my bank transactions, money in and money out from the 1st of April, and I can click connect. Now, I know I've got about 85 or so transactions, so it shouldn't take very long at all. But now QuickBooks, again, is talking to Monzo, and it's going to bring through all of those transactions. And as part of that legislation, as it mentions there, it requires you to reauthorize it every 90 days. Now, here we go. I've got my Monzo current account connected. Now, I want to point out a couple of things here. The bank feed has brought through the date of those transactions, the description. So, it's pulled through sometimes the payee. It's also pulled through what, when someone pays you, it can pull through as the transaction. It's come up with a category or match that it thinks is relevant. But most importantly, it's come through and it's told me all the money I've spent and all the money I've received on my business. Now, this is a really, really important part. Notice here it's completely up to date. It is updated as of moments ago. It will automatically update 24/7. But sometimes, for example, HSBC, it doesn't update per hour. So if you want to update both, you can just click update in the top right-hand corner on there. And the idea here is that we've got all of my transactions which are under review. I've got 86 transactions. And what we want to do is we want to be able to get all of that financial information from the review into the categorized section. And what that means is that, roughly speaking, for every payment we've spent with the business, we want to have an expense or a receipt attached to it, or a bill, sorry, an expense or a bill rather. So let's say this £10 I spent with James Lang, what is that money for? I need to tell QuickBooks what that money is for. And equally, we've got all the money we've received. So usually that'll be money we've received from a client or a customer. Usually there'll be an invoice attached to it, not always. But we want to be in a situation where we're matching up the two. So for this example will happen here. For example, notice here I've received £50 from a client. And you can see QuickBooks has the option here for a match. So what it's done is it's found an invoice we have outstanding for £50 and it's looking for a match. So the idea is we've got our bank feeds connected, we've got our invoices in QuickBooks, we've got our expenses and bills raised in QuickBooks. We're going to be able to go through, match all of these, categorize them, and then ultimately what it's going to mean is that our bank balance will equal the balance that's in QuickBooks. There's a lot more to tell you about it, but the process here is just to tell you that it is a really simple process to be able to match up what we're spending on our business with what our bank is saying that we've spent, and to match up what we've received to what the bank is saying that we have received. And the idea here is this is going to be a much better conversation when you're having at the end of the year with your accountant, particularly with McGills. It's a fantastic way of staying on top of your bookkeeping. And the best part is if you stay on top of it, it's really quick and it's really easy and efficient. You don't have to spend time going through and measuring up against a bank statement. It's a much simpler process to do it on there. Please let me know if you have any questions at all on that. Again, it's a really sort of quick run through of the bank feeds, but hopefully it's quite simple. Now we are going to go through the third and final point of our webinar, which is around the receipt capture. Now, I've noticed here in the chat, Samantha, you mentioned that you currently attach your receipts through your bank, Starling. Now, Starling are a fantastic bank, really like a modern bank, and they have the option to be able to attach your receipts directly to that. You asked, do they feed through to QuickBooks, or is it better to add the receipts directly to QuickBooks? Now, unfortunately, at the moment, based upon the APIs I mentioned that Starling released to connect with accounting software such as QuickBooks or Xero, it doesn't have the functionality to be able to match those receipts and bring it through if you've done them on Starling, into QuickBooks. My personal opinion is that it's better to add the receipts directly through to QuickBooks. And absolutely, Ben's come up with a great point here. I'm going to show you the process of the receipt capture, and you can decide for yourself which process is better for you. Now, for those who aren't aware, the receipt capture allows you to take pictures of your receipts and your bills using the mobile app. What's brilliant is that QuickBooks will extract the information, match it to a transaction, and categorize it all within a couple of minutes. I wouldn't go as far as to say it's fun, but it is definitely enjoyable, particularly when you're like myself and you have for years put everything into a spreadsheet, had to keep your receipts in a carrier bag and give them to your accountant. This is a much better way. And for myself, I do part-time football coaching. I have a lot of expenses for my business. It means it's a lot better when it comes to not having to be chased by my accountant, but also to maximize my expense claims. Now, again, I'm a big fan of stats. 45% of small businesses are not maximizing their expense claims, and 42% of them are regularly losing their receipts. Now, I fall into both those categories, or at least I did previously. We want you to be in a situation where you're maximizing your expense claims, or telling HMRC how much you're spending on your business, reducing your profitability, and ultimately paying less tax at the end of the year. All right, so it's really easy to use, and all expenses are claimed as part of your tax bill. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you the mobile app again, because this is the first place I want to start with the receipt snap. It's not the only way to get receipts into QuickBooks, but I'll go with it as the example. So you can all see my mobile app. Now, I've got a receipt with me, and I'm just going to show you the process. So as I mentioned, I'm a football coach. I've got a Sports Direct receipt with me, and I've bought some football cones with that. So I've got my mobile app with me, and I can click the plus button at the bottom, which remember is going to give us access to features we're going to be using on a regular basis. And I can click Snap Receipt. Now, what that's going to do is that's going to open my camera. Now, before I take a quick picture of this, I'm just going to show you. It's going to be really quick. I'm going to put my camera over the receipt. It's going to put a green banner around it to show me the margins, and it captures it as quickly as that. I'm going to show you again because it's so quick. Okay, so take a picture. It puts it over the receipt like that. It puts a little green box, and it captures it like that. And I can click use this photo. And imagine you're in the car, you've just bought petrol, or you've been to a shop, for example, or you've spent money with a supplier, you've got a bill. You absolutely can snap a receipt like that. And you can do multiple receipts, or you can click done, and it tells you to go directly to QuickBooks Online. And that's all you need to do in the mobile app. So I'm going to go back into QuickBooks Online now. It really is a very simple process. It connects to your camera, you take a picture of the receipt or the bill, and it gets into QuickBooks. Now, if I go to transactions on the left and I go to receipts, or it might be billing, so it might be banking for you, go to receipts, and we can see here, when it loads, in the processing tab, it has that receipt we've just taken a picture of, and it can take up to 15 minutes to process, but in most cases it takes a couple of minutes. Now, we're not going to wait around 15 minutes, don't worry. Here's one I made earlier. So we can see here, this is a receipt I've just taken a picture of. Now, I haven't done anything with this. It's in my for review section. Now, I can go into the receipt I've just taken a picture of at the end of the week, for example, or at the end of the day, and I can click review. And it's going to open up this little window here. Now, if I scroll in here, we've got my nice receipt here for Sports Direct. It's exactly the same one. I feel a bit like a magician when I'm describing this. Is this your card? You've got the option here to choose whether it's a receipt or a bill. Now, a lot of people sort of ask me, what is the difference between a receipt and a bill? A receipt is something you've already paid for. So in a classic example is if you go to fill up with petrol, you pay for it on your card or cash maybe, and they give you a receipt proving confirmation that you've paid for it. A bill, for example, is something that, for example, Vodafone send me at the end of each month or beginning of each month saying, this is what you owe us, please pay us it by the end of the year, by the end of the month rather. So a bill is something you've yet to pay for. Now, you can choose between whether it's a receipt or a bill. Now, notice here I've got a classic receipt, but this works for full A4 receipts and full A4 bills as well. I'm going to click receipt. Next, I've got a big red banner here that asks me, which bank account did you actually spend this money with? Well, I actually spent it with my HSBC account, so I go to HSBC Current. And now this is brilliant. This is where the receipt capture comes into its own. It's taken the date, the 16th of January, sorry, 16th of October 2020, apologies, and it's put it in the payment date here. it's taken the name of the business, sportsdirect.com Retail Limited, and it's put it in there. Now I recognize them as Sports Direct, so I can change that slightly. And what's great, I'm just going to make that a bit like that. And what's great is it's taken the full amount here of £50.04. Now, I'm not a VAT registered business. If I did have VAT turned on, which you can do in QuickBooks, it's going to pull the VAT separately, and it will help when it comes to my VAT returns. Okay. So what QuickBooks has done is it's taken the payment date from the receipt, it's taken the description of where it's from, and it's taken the amount inclusive of tax on there. Now, I have the option here to be able to categorize this receipt, this expense. Now, if you're not sure how to categorize your receipts or your expenses, have a chat with McGills. But in this particular case, I've already had a chat with my accountant, and they've told me to categorize it as football equipment. I've also got the option in to put a memo to remind myself what it was for. It's completely optional, but useful for me to know. This was for football cones. Great.
I would say you should always put a memo in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You should always put a memo in. It's a really good idea because ultimately, when you're spending as much in your business, it's just good to remember what you spent things on, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I've got my football cones in there, and I can click save and next. Now, what QuickBooks is going to do here is it's going to say, have you already created an expense for this receipt? And more often than not, the answer would be no. So what it's going to do is it gives me the option to create an expense, and it's going to take all the information from that receipt that we've just classified, and we're going to be able to create an expense. So I click create expense. And what's going to happen now is if I go to my expenses, we can see here that there is now an expense created on the 16th of October for football equipment. And absolutely, as Ben said, I've got my memo in there, I've got football cones, and I've got it ready to go. Now, the benefit of having this in there is if I click view and edit, I've got my expense. Sorry, I have to zoom out slightly there. My expense has been created. Now, notice here, it's got the payment date, it's got the category, it's got the description, it's got the amount. Remember, if I was VAT registered, it would have the VAT split separately. It's got the memo as football cones in there. And this is what's brilliant, it's got the receipt saved. That receipt, that digital copy of that receipt is now saved in QuickBooks. And under Making Tax Digital, a digital copy of a receipt is as good as a physical copy of the receipt. So I'm really happy I've got that all there, and it's all come together really nicely. Now, let's say, for example, you wanted to categorize your receipt, your expense, under multiple categories. You could now go back into this expense here, and I could categorize it as something else, for example. I could split the amount, and I've got the option to do that in there. Now, the final piece of this puzzle is if I go to my billing, my banking, sorry, I keep saying that, go to my bank transactions, and I go to my HSBC current account, we can see here that, as I mentioned before, on the 16th of October, I've got a payment going out for £50.04 with Sports Direct. And naturally, QuickBooks has found a match. It's found the expense we've created, and it's looking to match it to the payment we've spent. And we can see here the expense has been created for the 16th of the 10th, 2020 for £50.04, and I can match it together. So now what that means for me is that that expense has been created in QuickBooks. I've got it saved. I've got the receipt saved in there as well. And I've matched it to the bank transaction as well. So at the end of the year, I've got all of my expenses claimed, and I've got, I'm in a better position when it comes to claiming my expenses as part of my tax bill, and it's all ready to go. I've got the online banking match there, I've got the receipt in there, and it's a really, really good process. Now, the same process happens, by the way, for bills. It's exactly the same concept. If I go to my receipts, I've got a bill here. And again, this is a energy bill. I go to bill, it's taken the payee from it, it's taken the due date. I just need to make sure and go through it and make sure everything's correct. Now, what I would say is that receipt capture will read as much as it can using OCR technology, but you still need to make sure, since you are the user, just make sure everything's correct. Now, we can see here that the total amount is taken is £105.43, which actually is correct. That is the subtotal of the cost of my energy this month. But we know, and we can see here, there is a credit of £76.93 on the account, and as such, the amount debited is only £28.50. So there is a little bit of work we need to do just to make sure everything's correct, because the payment going out of our account will be for £28.50, and we need to make sure that matches obviously to the bill on there. But it's a really quick and easy way to make sure that you are staying on top of those expenses, those receipts, those bills. And what I find really useful, now that picture, that receipt I took before, it is now processed through QuickBooks, and notice here it's come up with a duplicate. QuickBooks knows if you've already taken a picture of the same receipt. Very useful if you're someone like me who's quite forgetful. I can see it's got a duplicate in there. QuickBooks says you don't need to classify this receipt since you've already classified the other one. You can click delete, and it's the same with this bill here as well. Now, you may decide you don't want to use the mobile app, and that's completely fine. There are two other options you've got to be able to use the receipt capture. The first is if you scan your receipts and bills, if you use a scanner, you can scan them onto your computer and you can upload them directly into QuickBooks. You click into that, you choose the file, and it's fine. As long as it's saved as a PDF or a JPEG or a PNG, which are the normal formats associated with scanning, then you'll be able to get them into QuickBooks. Equally, you may receive emails from, let's say, a supplier, for example, with a bill on it. You may receive an email from a colleague with a receipt on it. You can actually drag and drop those attachments, as long as they're in a PDF or a PNG or a JPEG format, into that box here, and it will process it exactly the same way as we have with the taking of the picture with the receipt snap. Finally, there is an option to create an email address for email forwarding. Now, QuickBooks will create an email address with a domain at qbodocs.com. You can choose the name of this email address depending on your business. Now, I've chosen JE Coaching because that's the name of my business. And I can provide that email address to my suppliers and to my colleagues, for example. I can click into here. I can create them as a new sender, so they recognize that that's where I've received the email from them, and I can get that in. So you've got the options to take a picture of a receipt. You can scan in your receipts and bills. You can drag and drop them, or finally, you can set up that email forwarding on there. And it's a really fantastic way, as I mentioned, of staying on top of your expenses, making sure you're maximizing your expense claims, and ultimately not having to get chased by your accountant at the end of it for all those lost receipts that you may have lost in your car. So pretty much that is everything I wanted to cover today. Just to remind ourselves, we have been through the QuickBooks mobile app. We've had a look at how to connect to bank feed, and we've also looked at snapping receipts and bills with that receipt capture. Hopefully you found that useful. We've had some comments and questions throughout, but let me know. This is a dedicated time. If you want, for any questions, feel free to ask them, and myself and Ben will be happy to answer them on there. Ben, is there anything you also want to add about anything I've said or anything I may have missed?
No. Everything was covered, I think.
Fantastic. If no one has any questions, but please make sure you feel free to put them through. There is actually a little poll. We've got two polls. Just scroll down below where I showed you. There's the questions, polls, and offers tabs. In that polls tab, just below, it says, did you find this webinar useful? Would you attend more QuickBooks webinars in the future? It's really helpful for Ben and I just to understand if you found it useful or not. Tracy, you've asked, could I show you how to find the email address to send the receipt to again, please? Yeah, absolutely. Sorry if I went through that a bit quickly. Let me just share my screen again. So if you've been using QuickBooks for a while, but you haven't yet set up perhaps your email address here, what will happen is there'll be a little box there that will say set up email addresses for email forwarding. You click into it, and what's going to happen is it's going to give you the option. It will just give you that domain at qbodocs.com. You can choose whatever start of that email address you want. You can literally call it anything as long as it doesn't already exist. You set it up, and then let's say you've got 5 suppliers that you want to receive emails from. You can click into manage senders, and you can add them as users on there, just so purely so that it recognizes where it should be receiving emails from on there. Okay.
And that screen is transactions and receipts on the left-hand side.
Yes, absolutely. So yes, absolutely. So you go to transactions. QuickBooks is undergoing a bit of an update at the moment. So if it doesn't say transactions, it will say banking. And you go to that and you go to receipts at the bottom, and it's going to take you through to that screen. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit better, Tracy. Apologies if I went through that quite quickly. Lovely. Good. Okay, well, as I mentioned, If there are any other questions, feel free to ask. You're also welcome to get in touch with Ben or your contact at McGills, of course. And yeah, if you haven't already done so, please do let us know. Did you find the webinar useful? Would you attend more webinars in the future? We've got a great relationship with McGills. We'd love to be able to help moving forward. So if you just scroll down just underneath where I'm speaking now, there's questions and polls. Click the polls tab and just, feel free to answer those polls. But that is it pretty much from me. Ben, if there's anything else you want to add, we can call it.
Thank you for coming. Hopefully it was useful, you were saying on the poll. So
brilliant. Thanks everyone so much for your attention, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week. I'm going to close the webinar down now. Thanks very much.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers.